There are 168 hours in a week. We go to church for 1 hour. What about the other 167?
Cue this podcast. We're here to bring the church to you the rest of the week. I'm David Vogel, the Director of Communication here at Central Community Church.
I'm Corey Brodel, the Director of Community. We've been to the 1 hour in church. Now welcome to the other 167.
We are here today with Diana Thomi from Victory in the Valley, which is located right here in Wichita. And for the last 38 years, and it was founded by Diana, Victory in the Valley has been supporting cancer patients and their families as they go through the cancer journey. So thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Now, Diana, I reached out to you because recently we had several people on staff. One, get cancer himself, and then two, had wives that got cancer. And that really hits home to me because I am also a cancer survivor. March 31st will be 15 years. What?
Fantastic.
And so just reached out to you. I thought this was the perfect time to bring you in and hear what the Victory of the Valley story is, and then how you support cancer patients. So let's start with, you've got a really interesting past with your mom, and it all starts there. So let's go ahead and get into that story.
Sure. Well, in 1982, I was working as a nurse at the hospital. I'd worked in endoscopy and also then in oncology for a while. And my mom came to me one day and she said, I've got this red spot on my breast that's very unusual. What do you think it is? And I had taken care of a couple ladies that had that same symptom that when they presented with their cancer, and I was pretty sure I knew probably what it was. But I did what every good nurse does. I went home, read all my medical books so I could help the doctors in case they needed my assistance.
That's like Googling now, right?
Exactly. They never found that too helpful, however.
No.
But through it, it seems like things just have a life of their own once that happens. And she ended up having inflammatory breast cancer. 3% of all breast cancers are that type, and they have a very, very poor success rate, especially back in the early 80s. So that began her journey of chemo, radiation, surgery, and another year of chemo. It was a hard year for all of us. As a daughter, and I'm an only child, so as a daughter and a nurse, I was primary caregiver to both my parents because, as you know, cancer is a family disease, and everybody that loves the person that's going through it goes with them through it. And so they told Mom she probably had maybe 6 or 8 months to live.
Wow.
That was just totally shocking and overwhelming, as any diagnosis is when you get one like that. And so after she was getting close to finishing her chemo and was still alive, she was helping patients in the waiting rooms and in the treatment rooms, talking to them about cancer and about her experience. And, they were asking questions like, I've taken chemo, but I'm not going to do radiation because that's horrible. And Mom said, man, if you've made it through chemo, try radiation because it's easier. And all those questions that no one was answering, there were no ongoing things about cancer at that time. And so Mom took their names and contact information, and that was very nice. And then one day she came to me, and I had moved home to be there for her if she needed it. This list of names and addresses grew very long. And it turned into actually kind of a guilt list. And so Mom said, these people need help. Well, my dad was the superintendent of the rescue mission here in town for 20 years, and this was after he had retired from that. So our whole family had kind of been helpers throughout our lives. So Mom said, well, will you help me, and let's send an invitation to these people and see if we can help them. So we wrote this little thing that said, come to our house at such and such a time, and we'll talk about cancer and refreshments will be served. And we thought, that is the dumbest invitation anybody would ever get. But
That's a party.
yeah, really. Let's eat cookies and talk about cancer. I mean, who would want to miss that? And so we didn't expect anybody to come. And so we did have cookies, but the time came and our house was filled with people, patients and caregivers. And so Mom started out the meeting just because we were in the kitchen trying to figure out what to do. And she said, I'll just see if they'll go around the room and share, and then that'll buy us some time to figure out what to do next. So we were very well planned and prepared. But we started out, and Mom said, let's start with this gentleman here, and if you would like to share. And he said, I don't have cancer. My wife has cancer. In fact, I'm pretty mad at God about it. So what do you think about that? And we all thought that was not a good way to start the meeting, you know. But Mom said, God understands, and he loves you, and he's here to go through this with you. And he started to weep, and across the room, his wife was sitting, and she said, I've had cancer for 2 years. This is the first time he's talked about it.
Wow.
And so that night, that's all we did. We went around the room, people shared, caregivers shared how they're helpless they were feeling about knowing what to do. And when we completed going around the room, there was some laughter and some tears. And we served our cookies, and we thought, well, boy, we're glad that's over. And as they left, they said, okay, what time next week?
Wow.
Next week was not on our calendar. But the Lord had something else in mind. And so Mom said, well, if you'll come back, we'll do this again. And the next week, we had outgrown our house. And it just had taken off from there. And that was the beginning of an organization that we never had any idea we were going to start or going to be involved with.
So tell us, that's Victory in the Valley right there. That's the very first meeting. So tell us from there how you got the name Victory in the Valley, and then kind of it's such a God story. I know it. You told me about it, but I can't wait for them to hear it too. So maybe take us through all those little God moments that you had. Well,
it was during that time that Mom read in her devotions a story about the first Kings, where there was warring armies. The Syrians and the Israelites were fighting, and they were fighting in the hills. And so the king said, their God must be the God of the hills, so move the battle to the valley, and surely you will win there. And that struck Mom, is that all of us have valley times in our lives. And we feel in the valley, we feel afraid, alone, vulnerable, sometimes angry, sometimes worried, sometimes all those things. And so the story goes on that the Syrians lost the battle in the valley too, because God is God of the hills and the valleys. And that struck Mom, and Mom said, I think the name should be Victory in the Valley, because with cancer, with good medical care, with your faith, with support, you can go through it victoriously. And one of my friends wrote a poem about victory, and she said the battle is, whether you win or whether you lose, the victory is ours. And that's really the crux of Victory in the Valley. So from there, we had to move to another home that was larger. We just kept meeting and moving and ended up having sometimes 40, 50, 60 cancer patients and their families coming to receive encouragement and hope. And we never, ever thought about doing this, So we decided, people were saying, we'd like to give you a little donation. And we thought, well, okay, but you need to be a nonprofit. So we had an attorney family member who said, well, I'll file with the state. So we filed with an annual budget of $250 because we were going to buy stamps and flowers and
And the cookies.
And the cookies, yeah. And so we didn't really have any foresight about, anything other than we just have support groups. And we began to learn more and more about it and begin to see ways that we could help. And people were just still coming. And so soon it became very obvious that there were a lot of people from surrounding areas of Kansas that had to come to Wichita for treatment. And they didn't have a place to stay. They didn't know what to do, big city versus their small town. And so we decided, well, we ought to start some kind of a lodging thing. And so we prayed about it, and Mom won an award with Cake TV. They were doing the 10 Who Care Awards back in that day. And so she presented that night. It was a televised event. She presented that she wanted to start a lodging facility, something like a house, for patients that could stay with their families when they came to town for treatment. And a gentleman saw that, and he called us up and he said, "We have the perfect place for you. This is just what you're looking for. It's an apartment complex down by one of the major hospitals, and there are 19 fully furnished apartments, and it would be perfect just for what your needs are." And Mom said, yeah, okay, thank you. That was it. We weren't looking for anything like property. And he kept calling. The persistence of knocking, just continuing. So Mom, to get rid of him, basically said, okay, I'll come look at it. And that's it. So we went down, and it was perfect. It was beautiful apartments and, everything taken care of. And it was only $600,000. We were trying to figure out at $250 a year how exactly we were going to make that happen. But once again, God provided. A gentleman whose wife was going through cancer that Mom knew, a Christian man, said, "You know what? If you decide to get that, I will give you from my foundation $100,000 interest-free, and you can pay back whenever you can." Well, then we thought, okay, looks like maybe God's in this one, And another relative of ours who was the vice president of Motorola said, "Hey, I'll sign a note at the bank so that you can go ahead and just get started." And before we knew it, in 1986, we had an apartment complex, and we had people from all over the state that needed a place to stay. And some of the saddest things that happened. I remember one lady that came for treatment for 6 weeks. Her husband never came to visit, and when her treatment was over, he never came to pick her up. So, those things that were going on were just unbelievable, and folks that really needed help. And so from that time, then we began to add other services as we had opportunity, and added, transportation. We had groceries in the apartment and different things to make their stay comfortable, and then added support groups. So that's really how we grew. It was totally a God thing. People ask me, well, aren't you really proud of what you did? And I said, if I'd have done it, I'd have been real proud, but God did it, and he just let us be a part of it. So it was a special time.
So that's the history of Victoria Valley. Can you tell us what you provide for services now for cancer patients?
We have many of the same services. We have transportation for patients that live in Wichita and take them to and from cancer appointments, treatment appointments. Many of them have to rely on family to take off work and take them to treatments. And so we can pick them up at their houses, drive them there, and then make sure they get safely home. Before COVID, we were driving, I can't remember how many 100,000 miles a year we drove in town, taking people to treatment. We had 13 active support groups. Again, there are many of them by Zoom now, but they're waiting to get to come meet again. We have lodging assistance if people need to come in to stay. Now we don't own the property of lodging, and just as an aside, the doctors began to go out to the communities and open satellite offices, and so therefore we didn't need that lodging, and not to waste a penny of donated funds. We sold that property to another organization that wants to help people get off the street and get into permanent lodging. So we now are at a big house on the corner at 375355 Douglas, which was the old venue. So it's a beautiful home, and that's kind of our headquarters. We have a women's boutique there with wigs, turban, scarves, hats. Women who are suffering hair loss can come in and get anything they need. Everything is free.
Wow.
We have a grocery pantry so that people that are not able to work and are, struggling financially, we can give them groceries just on a regular basis while they're on treatment. And we have a women's weekend for all women cancer survivors and patients up at Heston, and women come, and it's just a weekend of learning and laughing and having fun. And women who, have financial issues just come for free. The others have a nominal fee, but we bring in wonderful speakers and all kinds of entertainment that's just uplifting, and it's a great weekend. We usually have about 150 women attend. We do so many other things and all of our services are free to anybody who, who can use them. And our goal is to make sure that nobody has to go through cancer alone.
Wow.
And so that's, whatever the need is, that's what we try to do.
I'm curious, about how many patients are you serving a year?
The last I knew, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22,000, because we do have support groups and services now in smaller communities around like Newton and Independence and all around the state. So
that's incredible.
It's kind of amazing to us too.
So I'm assuming your budget's a little bit bigger than 250
it really is.
now.
It's a little past 500. No, it's grown considerably, and through the generosity of people who, we don't ask any of the patients for anything, but so many of them appreciate what they've been given and how we've been able to serve them, and they turn around and give back, which is just such a blessing. The envelope that I opened recently had a crumpled up $1 bill in it. And I have to tell you this story. We had a gentleman that we took to a very, very poor area in town, and we drove him every day for 6 weeks, and every day he'd say, "I need to give you money." And the driver would say, No, you don't need to give us anything. We're just glad to do this. And so the last day that we drove him, he said, "Today I'm going to give you money." And the driver said, "Well, we've been over this, but you don't need to do anything." He said, "No, I need to." And the driver said, "Okay," and held out his hand, and the guy dropped 37 cents into his hand.
Wow.
And he said, "I wish it was more, but this is all I have."
Wow.
And all the gifts are wonderful, but those gifts from people who give all they have are just overwhelmingly amazing, and so grateful for everything. Wow. So the services just we add to it as we need to. And we have a wonderful board of directors that supports us and helps in the leadership, and it just keeps on going in spite of us.
So you told us how you guys can support people. How can us, the viewers, the people listening to this podcast, the members of our church, how can we support you guys?
Well, certainly the food pantry always seems to get bare. Box mixes, canned goods, cereal, peanut butter, Jell-Os, those kinds of things. That's the staples of your pantry go out about as quickly as it goes in. So we're always in need of that. Money, obviously, allows us to buy what we don't have in the grocery pantry. We also provide gas cards for people that do come from out of town that need. We have a lot from western Kansas. And so they come in and they can pick up gas cards and groceries while they're in town to go back home. So any kind of gift cards are very much appreciated. And just, financial gifts of any kind. We have, in our women's boutique, we have wigs, turbans, scarves, hats. We have all kinds of mastectomy supplies that we provide for ladies free of charge. So anything that, the donation of 37 cents is vitally important.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that boutique really speaks to me. When I went through cancer, I did lose my hair, and I was only 23 at the time. So my appearance kind of meant a lot to me. So I went to a wig store and spent a little too much because I needed that real looking hair. But that, just being able to support them in that decision and say, here, this is free of charge, I just know means so much for those ladies.
Well, and we like sewers to, we have a quilting group called Stitches of Hope, and they make lap quilts for our patients. We have people that like to crochet, some Afghans or whatever that we give away. We don't keep anything. It all goes out. So a lot of, I don't know if you had a port when you were going through it. Did you get a port pillow?
No, I did not get a port pillow.
Well, we have, as you know, putting a seatbelt over your port is very uncomfortable, so a lot of people won't wear their seatbelts. And we have a little pillow that has Velcro, and it goes around the seatbelt so that the pillow lays against the port, so you will wear your seatbelt. So, things like that people make are made with love and given out with love. And we also give everybody that's been diagnosed a teddy bear. And I'll never forget one of the guys that we came to it. It looked like he was probably living on the street, and he came in to get his treatment. And so our volunteer went over to him very gingerly and said, I don't know if you'd like this teddy bear or not, but we want you to know that you don't have to go through this alone, and we'd like to give it to you. And he kind of grunted, and took it, just kind of grabbed it. And she thought, well, that went well. But, that guy came every day to his treatment carrying his bear by himself.
Wow.
So we have this hospitality center up by the Cancer Center of Kansas, and we have refreshments in there, good cup of coffee. And before COVID, a table with a puzzle and reading material, and volunteers who were survivors. And they go up there and serve those folks and visit with them and listen to them. And it's a place, it's an oasis in the storm for the patients and the caregivers. And so it's a place where people understand without having to be told what you're going through, because they're there to walk through it with you. And we see, again, before COVID, it wasn't anything to see 100 people a day in there.
Wow.
And again, all the refreshments are free, so whatever we have, the chips, the cookies, whatever, that all goes to them. As far as finances, 87 cents of every dollar that comes to Victory in the Valley goes to people. So we are very volunteer driven. That's another thing if people are interested in volunteering. We have about 200 volunteers. That is not all here. It's in the other locations where people, go into the treatment rooms or lead support groups or whatever, and work in the women's boutique and just all of those things. So we have a very small staff, and by design, because we want the money to go where people want it to go. I did make one exception to that, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but
nobody's listening. It's
on
okay.
Camera.
Okay, close your eyes and don't listen. One day, a sweet, dear lady came in, and she had a big box of tea bags. And she said, I was hoping maybe that you could use these. And we said, sure, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's great. She said, oh, good. I thought you could use them because I only used them once. So we thanked her very much for thinking of us. And then we took the tea bags. And then she went one way and we went another.
That's so funny.
But, that doesn't happen very often. It was just one of those memories that...
It's the thought that counts.
It really does. It really does. Very giving of her. So, but anyway, we have a lot of laughter, a lot of fun, not at their expense, but in spite of cancer.
Yes.
And, there's so many people that are struggling and don't know how to deal with this. And our goal is to walk with them through the journey and to, we do it like Jesus met the woman at the well. She was there for water. And he talked to her first about water. And then he talked to her about the living water. And that's our goal as we have opportunity to share the truth of knowing if you win this battle, great. If you don't win this battle, great, because you can know where you're going to go. And that's by knowing Jesus. And so we don't proselytize and we don't preach. We try to live it, serve it, and share it as we have opportunity. So...
Okay, Diana, let's end with you telling us where they can find you. Do you have a website? How would they contact you if they want to start volunteering or giving? Tell us your website or anything that they need to know.
Okay, we're at victoryinthevalley.org, and we are at 3755 East Douglas is our main office, and then our phone number, 316-682-7400. And if people want to come in, the house is built in 1906. So it's over 100 years old and it's gorgeous. And if people want to just come in and visit and see it and have a cup of coffee, we do have fresh coffee. We don't serve old coffee or tea.
Not the used tea.
No, we don't do that. But if just to come see the house with the lead glass and all the wood and everything else, it's gorgeous and it's been very well taken care of before we even got it. But we love to show people around and to share what we do and minister to them if they are in need, and otherwise just meet new friends. So...
Well, thank you, Diana, for being here. I might come and take you up on that coffee offer just so I can come hang out with you.
Anytime. We'll even let him come. Right?
We might.
Yeah,
we might.
maybe. You'll have to wait in the car.
Well, thanks, Diana. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. Lord bless you all.
Thanks for listening to 167. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening from.
And to keep up with everything at Central Community Church, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to watch us record this podcast live, find us on YouTube.
We think the 167 hours between church services are so important, and we hope you'll share this episode with your friends. Join us next week.